right, I'll get a brief comment about it from Keith Sullivan, who joins us here, criminal defense attorney, a lot of legal experience in this area. Kind of your takeaway from this?
It's very concerning that he's claiming that there are as many as 80 cells out there. We have to look at that against the backdrop of the borderline insane conduct that he undertook, and the fact that his own attorney is saying he's mentally insane. But you can't take any precautions in today's day and age. I mean,
wasn't he supposedly on Facebook communicating to his 7,000 plus followers before this?
Exactly. So there certainly was some information out there. Maybe this could have been prevented. But when you have somebody who's carried out such a heinous act, claiming that there are 80 other cells out there, you have to do the investigations and see if we can round these up.
All right, is Dwane Cates available? There he is. I see him now. Dwane joining us, criminal defense attorney from Phoenix, Arizona. Also a tremendous amount of legal experience in federal court as well. Just get kind of your reflections on this case. It seems like they're going to have to do a lot more investigation on some of these right-wing extremist groups, especially since this evidence has been developed during the course of this case and this information has come out.
Well, that's true. You know, if they've got information that there's 80 other cells out there, I mean, they've got to start looking into this. I mean, they've got to use every resource possible to prevent this from happening again. But the problem is this is extremely hard to prevent. I mean, a lone person with a gun, especially going somewhere where guns aren't prevalent, and starting to shoot people, it's really hard to prevent that. So they've got to do everything they can to track these cells down and find out who these people are before they start shooting. Yeah,
and we'll see about the issue of whether or not he was legally insane. Depending on some of the comments, they're going to look at download everything from the computer to see the kind of premeditation, the deliberation, whether he knew right from wrong, whether there was some specifics that they can show to defeat the
see what his behavior pattern was leading up to this and in response to it. And you have to determine, does the person know right from wrong?
Right.
They can be out of their mind, but if they know the difference between right and wrong, in the United States, they're not going to get the benefit of the insanity.
You're absolutely right about that. Okay, a lot of stories to discuss in our legal roundtable today, and I want to talk about some breaking news that developed. This was with respect to Representative David Wu. There was accusations that he had a forced sexual encounter with the young woman. It was a daughter of one of his, I guess, big contributors, etc. So he's now stepped down. What do you think went on behind the scenes here? Because that's a pretty quick turnaround from when this broke.
It's tough to tell, and this may be controversial, but I think the fact that he's of Asian descent may play a role as well, because they tend to take these allegations far more serious than non-Asians.
Meaning in the Asian American community that they might, they would maybe.
But let's just keep in mind, forget about the ick factor and the weirdness of it. That she was of age. It doesn't appear to be that he committed any crime. At least no allegations of that have come forth. She left a phone message on his office phone saying, I had inappropriate relations and unwanted sexual relations with him. What that means, that's for her to define and only for her to define. If she's 18, she's a consenting adult, it's very strange. He's 56. This is a daughter of a friend, of a contributor. Certainly, it's taking away from his ability to work as a congressman for his constituents.
It's totally inappropriate if true. Go ahead, Dwane.
Yeah, and I disagree somewhat. From everything that I've read and looking into this case, it sounds like she's making claims of sexual assault, that this was an unwanted sexual encounter, which would make what he did a crime. And I think him stepping down is something that he absolutely had to do, and something else he absolutely has to do is keep his mouth shut. I mean, he's been making he made statements that, you know, the two things they're going to have to prove for a crime is that there was sexual contact and that the sexual contact was unwanted. Well, he made a statement that the sexual contact was consensual. Well, that takes care of one of the elements that the government has to prove. He admits that he had sexual contact. Now, they may have a problem proving whether it was consensual or unconsensual, but he's got to keep his mouth shut. And then the latest statement he came out and said was basically that hey, I'm sorry for any embarrassment I caused the family or the girl. Well, he didn't say, I didn't do it. I mean, he's got to, number one, he's got to stop talking right now.
Yeah, but he must know, Dwane, that they got the goods on him. Okay, I don't know if they've got like a Monica Lewinsky dress or they have some DNA samples, DSK style from the hotel room. But nevertheless, if there's email chains, you know, messages, kind of like tweets out there, whatever, he can't say that he didn't do it if he knows that they've got the information. I get what you're saying about the consent part. That's the whole issue.
She didn't go to the police.
Absolutely.
Well, I understand, and that's
and
there's no prosecution.
Well, that's an absolute, and that's a problem. And in any he said, she said case, that's a problem. But most rape victims don't go to the police right away. It's really common for that to happen. Now, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I believe they would have a very difficult time prosecuting him for sexual assault in this case for that very reason. But what I'm saying is he's got to stop making statements, and he couldn't go through an ethics committee. Ethics violation committee, because he would have to talk and he would have to give testimony. He did the right thing. He resigned, and right now he's got to just keep his mouth shut,
all right, well,
or he could end up in criminal trouble.
Let me give you this. I'm citing anonymous sources, and this is from FoxNews.com, the best place ever for all news. Citing anonymous sources, also the Oregonian reported that Wu told senior aides that the sexual encounter with the young woman in California was consensual. Like you said, he's saying a lot of stuff there that's going to help if there was a case. But that also the woman decided not to press charges because there were no witnesses and it would have been her word against his, and she thought that that was too much of an insurmountable burden. I mean, this is a guy who's won 7 terms, back to back, and in 2004 he won despite acknowledging a decades-old college incident in which he tried to force a former girlfriend to have sex. So there is past history of forced sexual encounter. He was still able to survive election, and if the DA brought a case, that type of evidence could be brought in. They could determine whether it was too prejudicial, but if the probative value, Keith, outweighed the prejudicial, those prior bad acts just show if there was a similar kind of MO, the way he did it, that type of thing.
Absolutely, that could come in. But, Dwane, to follow up on what you mentioned about rape victims and their response to being raped, what you're referring to is the outcry that they normally don't tell people, and that's why they allow the outcry witness to testify around the hearsay rule.
Absolutely.
Here, she's not a woman who went quietly into the night. She picked up the phone and she called his campaign office. She called his headquarters and left a message for all to hear. I mean, this isn't a person who wanted to keep this quiet. She wanted to embarrass him and go public with it, but for whatever reason, did not want to go to the authorities with it, and that is very troubling.
Okay, and the last thing here, in January of this year, the guy was already in trouble. He was embattled because 7 staffers resigned because of a behavior that included Representative Wu sending a photo of himself as a tiger, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, something like that, costume to a staff member and made an angry public speech. I'm not even,
Kim, I looked for that picture online. I couldn't find it.
I want to see the tiger. Wu went tiger. All right, so we're going to move on from that, although it's been fun. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to get into Clemens. I want to hear about the retrial, whether or not you guys think that he's going to be retried, or did the DA blow it all together with that rookie mistake. Lots more when we return. Check us out, FoxNews.com Live. All right, with the very latest from the D.C. Bureau, we're joined by Shannon Bream, who has more of the developments on the case of the embattled congressman stepping down, I guess amidst pressure from Nancy Pelosi and other key Democrats that this was just too big a scandal for anybody to tolerate. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Kimberly. Well, there was definitely a sense on Capitol Hill last night that Congressman Wu was facing some pressure, at least privately, to step down. Now, we've learned that 2 chiefs of staff for Oregon's 2 Democratic senators told the congressman's chief of staff that if he didn't resign today, they were publicly prepared to issue a statement. We've got that statement. It reads in part, quote, "The accusations against David Wu are both jarring and exceptionally serious. While no one takes pleasure in asking a colleague to resign, we believe he can no longer be effective representative for our shared constituents and should, in the best interest of Oregon, step down." Well, Wu apparently doesn't agree with all of that. We do know he's going to step down, but he's not going to do so immediately, apparently believing he can still serve effectively. He says today, quote, "I cannot care for my family the way I wish while serving in Congress and fighting these very serious allegations. I therefore intend to resign effective upon the resolution of the debt ceiling crisis." Kimberly, of course, we know it's anyone's guess as to how long that's actually going to take. And remember, yesterday, Pelosi did refer him to the Ethics Committee. As long as he's still a member of Congress, they could launch an investigation as long as he sticks around in Washington. Kimberly?
All right, Shannon, thank you for that update. It just keeps on coming. Let me tell you, very interesting.
It does.
I don't know when that debt ceiling thing is going to get worked out. He might be around for a while.
He'll still be here.
I know, exactly. All right, thanks so much. Okay, so as promised, we're going to talk about Roger Clemens. I get asked about this all the time, you know, and we talked about it on O'Reilly. Did it go too far? Did the prosecutor, how could they make such a huge mistake when they were ordered not to allow in this evidence? It was part of a videotape of a Senate hearing where a senator referred to testimony that was deemed inadmissible. The judge declared a mistrial, so now the judge has to decide if he's going to allow the prosecutors to proceed forward. What's your call?
My opinion, he's going to let them go back and retry him again.
Go back and retry
I think
it.
this was a garden variety mistake. I've handled cases where you're dealing with the dominant evidence being on DVD and videotape, where you're back and forth to the VCR and you have DVDs all over your counsel table, and you go to grab the one you think that's it, and your heart sinks a little bit. And is this the hard copy? Is this the edited copy?
Is that what happened, though, Keith? Because I thought they were intending to play that tape of that, you know, congressional hearing, and then inadvertently forgot that portion also contained inadmissible hearsay regarding what's his name's wife?
Andy Pettit's wife.
They
were allowed to play portions of it, but they could not play the portion where the politicians said Andy Pettit's wife was very credible when she said that Roger Clemens had discussed using steroids.
Right.
Very damaging testimony, and that's what the jury heard.
I mean, that's outrageous. Dwane, what do you think?
Well, I think the judge was absolutely right in declaring a mistrial, and you know, the standard is that if the defense asks for the mistrial, then they get to retry him. The only exception to that rule, the United States Supreme Court came out with one exception to that rule, and the one exception to that rule is if the prosecution goaded the defense into asking for a mistrial. And there's only two possibilities in this case. Either the prosecution just made a huge monumental error, or they didn't like the jury that they had picked and wanted to dump the case and go forward. I don't think the prosecution wanted to dump the case this early in the case. I think it's probably going to be retried.
Okay, yeah, I don't think they wanted to do that at all. I mean, they had done a couple weeks of jury selection. They were 2 days into testimony. I mean, that's a big pain, especially if they thought they had a good jury. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Maybe the prosecutor's not bummed out about it.
And it didn't happen during the course of the evidentiary presentation. The attorneys and the judge were in chambers, and the VCR was left on and was played to the jury.
Okay.
Clearly an inadvertent error.
You had a final comment on that, Dwane?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it was an innocent mistake. Now, I have had cases where I think the prosecution tried to get a mistrial because things weren't going well for them. But in this case, I think it was probably just an error, and it was a big one.
Wow, that's bad. The prosecutor shouldn't do that. Okay. All right, so we've got another report here out of Reuters, which is the forensic expert attack Amanda Knox trial evidence. This is pretty fascinating. The independent forensic expert took the stand on Monday to attack key pieces of evidence that were used to convict the American student Amanda Knox of the murder, you recall, of her British roommate in the Italian city of Perugia in 2007. There was a lot of debate and discussion on this case, Keith, as to whether or not she was responsible or whether or not it was, you know, the blame was put on her, if she was just present at the time.
Yeah, this case is a fascinating case, and I would say it should be a great movie one day, although they've already done the movie, so that's done already. But these two experts testified to the court, and they will be cross-examined by both defense attorneys as well as the prosecutors come this Saturday. That's the next day they're in session, and basically they said the gathering of the DNA process was contaminated, and therefore there was cross-contamination. They did not refute the fact that the victim's DNA was found on the tip of the knife that was found at the boyfriend's house. And that is, I think, very damaging for Amanda Knox.
That's the problem. What they said is the police, when they were at the crime scene, Dwane, went and used the same gloves, right? They're picking up evidence, so there could have been a transfer of DNA, because although there wasn't, I guess, that knife thought to have been used to kill Meredith Kircher carried no trace of blood, and might have been contaminated from another piece of DNA that they pick up, you know, on some object or whatever, with the same gloves that they pick up the knife. Therefore, they go, oh, look, see, here's her DNA on the tip of this.
Yeah, I read several stories this morning, and they said that there was no DNA found on the blade or the tip of the knife. There was Amanda Knox's DNA was on the handle of the knife.
Okay.
And this case was a forensic nightmare. I mean, these forensic independent experts said that there were over 50 protocol violations in collecting the evidence. And the people that originally, the officers that originally came to the scene, they called them like the junior league officers. They were like postal inspectors. and it wasn't the homicide detectives. And if you use the same gloves to pick up every piece of evidence,
right,
you risk transferring DNA from one thing to another.
Well, her DNA would,
so that explains
her DNA.
That explains the DNA on the handle of the knife,
right? Because the knife's found in her boyfriend's apartment where she's staying and sleeping and spending a lot of time. Like you said, that with her DNA, Amanda Knox, the defendant, was on the handle, and they said the other material found on the knife was starch and not blood.
Absolutely, and that's extremely important, because what really convicted her was the fact that there was the victim's blood on the knife blade and her DNA on the handle, which puts her hand on the knife and connects it to the victim. Now, if the blood on the blade goes away and it turns into starch, she's got a very good chance. Now, I heard this morning that 50% of the cases in Italy are overturned on appeal. 50%.
Yeah.
I
so
think
she
she's got
may
a good
get
chance.
off. Yes, and there was one last point, Dwane, before we have to let you go. They also said there was no DNA evidence on a clip, I guess from Kircher's bra, which police said was traceable to Solicito, to the boyfriend. I don't know. It's very interesting. We'll see what happens. But predictions, you think this case is going to get overturned? Because they certainly don't like her there. She's not very popular.
Well, I think it has to get overturned.
Overturned.
All right, so we shall see.
Overturned here, too.
We shall see. All right, Dwane, we want to thank you for being with us on the program. Dwane Cates, criminal defense attorney out of Phoenix, Arizona, where they have nice weather and nice homes. Okay.